I want to get to this story too, actually, because this is sort of stunning. And not for a very unexpected reason. This story interested me. Charlie Savage had flagged it on Twitter as a possible explanation for one of the things that has caused the resignation of Chuck Hagel, or the suggested resignation of Chuck Hagel that he ultimately has now fulfilled. A story about a Kuwaiti released from Guantanamo Bay. He had been in Guantanamo Bay for 13 years without trial. He was released about 3 weeks ago. His repatriation was the first transfer to result from a new system of parole board-like hearings to periodically review whether it's still necessary to keep holding prisoners. It was also only the second low-level prisoner to be released from Guantanamo this year. So that's about one every, 5 or 6 months. The Pentagon has notified Congress that 9 other detainees, including 6 bound for Uruguay, may soon be transferred. The administration had been poised to repatriate 4 Afghans who had been long approved for transfer, but Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel recently pulled back from that plan. Now, apparently, the administration had decided at a so-called Principals Committee meeting on October 3rd in the White House Situation Room. I don't know who's involved in the principals, but, National Security Advisor Susan Rice, I would imagine the defense secretary. I would imagine a couple other high-placed officials in the administration. Notice was supposed to be given within a week after the State Department obtained an unspecified security assurance from the Afghan government. That was completed 3 weeks ago, but Mr. Hagel refused to send the notice to Congress. Now, apparently, it's very unusual for a cabinet secretary to basically say, like, oh, I know the principals committee has decided upon this, but I'm not going to do it.
It almost reminds me of Geithner not acting on some of Obama's initiatives on banks that Obama requested.
Yes.
That's the closest parallel I could think of.
But that was Geithner sort of being hemming and hawing. Right. This seems a little bit more...
This is more direct.
Yes, this is not a little bit less passive.
Yeah.
So according to this, and this is the part that is really disturbing. Well, there's a lot that's disturbing, but this is just beyond disturbing. And for those of you who are like, why spend so much time on Fox News bull crap? Here's why. Mr. Hagel's apparent decision to pull back from swiftly repatriating the Afghans, this is in the New York Times, came amid turbulence prompted by an inaccurate Fox News report about former Guantanamo detainees fighting in Syria. Specifically, Fox News reported last Thursday, this would be in late October, early November, that as many as 20, in other words, a couple of days before the election, that as many as 20 to 30 former Guantanamo Bay detainees released within the last 2 to 3 years are suspected by intelligence and defense officials of having joined forces with the Islamic State and other militant groups inside Syria. That's a direct quote from Fox News. This is the Times. In fact, since January 2011, a total of 22 detainees had left the prison, of whom no more than 2, perhaps none, are suspected or confirmed of re-engagement. This according to semi-annual reports issued by the Office of Director of National Intelligence. An official said there had been no Syria-related change to its numbers since the most recent report. In other words, Fox simply made it up or found someone to make it up or reported upon someone who was making it up and did nothing to check their information. Fox News later altered its report without noting that it had been changed. So there was no correction issued, and instead reads, quote, some of whom were released within the last 3 years. So in other words, maybe there are people involved in Syria they don't know. but they certainly haven't been released within the last 3 years. Apparently, this Fox News report not only impacted Hagel's decision, but Buck McKeon, the California Republican, chairs the House Armed Services Committee, and Senator Kelly Ayotte, Republican of New Hampshire, released letters to the administration in early November calling for a moratorium on transfers, citing public reports and a public report today about former Guantanamo detainees joining the Islamic State. In other words, this is the impact of a fake story from Fox News. And there does not seem to be any way whatsoever of reversing the impact of it, stemming the impact of it. And it gets a sidebar mention in a New York Times piece that this stuff is actually changing national security policy.
You know, this is certainly not the most important point about this, but what I find really ironic is that Chuck Hagel himself has been on the receiving end of smears and discredited stories from this whole media apparatus, including Fox. So the fact that he would turn around, I mean, it's just mind-boggling. It would be like if someone was in your apartment building and you knew that they were spreading false rumors about you, and then you just sort of turned around and said, yeah, but we shouldn't let that other person move in because of the same person that was lying about me told me that this other person wasn't credible.
Well, it also speaks to, I mean, the failure of, you'll recall that the New York Times was one of the, I believe, the people lining up to complain when the White House was putting a Fox at the back of the room in the press conferences. Mm-hmm. I mean, at one point, the media establishment in this country, the broader establishment, has to say, Fox News is a joke. I mean,
they either have to say Fox News is a joke or the Majority Report and Democracy Now! And Citizen Radio should get front row seats at White House press briefings as well.
No, I mean, because I don't want to be put on parity with them, because if we were to actually report on something like that, which we could, we could make up that story just as easily as they did.
Well, we would make up different things.
I mean,
like as an example of
they may have gotten it from Breitbart for all I know. We could have reported the same thing.
Have you heard about Hannity's heroin addiction?
And,
as an example.
Well, I mean that's well documented as far as I know.
Yeah. Look it up.
As far as I know, and I have limited knowledge on it because I have refused to look it up.
Right. But you know it's out there.
And if we are found to be mistaken, we will certainly put that those allegations are unverified and undocumented. They're simply allegations.
That's right.
But, so, I mean, that's the point, is that, I mean, can you imagine if we had made a mistake like that, what we would be involved in trying to rectify that? There'd be corrections written all over it.
Right. I just, even again, from the perspective of Hagel as a person who's been in the political process and saw the way they went after him during not only his confirmations, but when he was a Republican that critiqued the Bush administration on Iraq, it really actually boggles my mind that he would take them seriously as a source.